Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, to external objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Text 22. Yehi sangsparsha jabhoga dukkha yonayap evate adyantavanta gonteya nate suramate buddha. Translation: an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Text 23. Shaknoti aevaya shudhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodha bhavam vegam sayukta sasuki naraha. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and is happy in this world. Text 24. Yonta sukam tararamas tatantar jyotirevaya sayogi brahmanirvanam brahmabhuto digachati. Translation: one whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within, and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Text 25. Labante brahmanirvanam rishayakshina kalmashaha chinadvayadatmana sarvabhuta hiterataha. Translation: one who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. Text 26. Kama krodha vimuktanam yatinam yatachetasam bhavito brahmanirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Translation: those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Text 27 through 28. Sparshan kritva bahir bhayang chakshuschaivantare bhruvo pranapano samo kritva nasavyantara yatendriya manobudhir manur moksha parayana vigate chamaya krodho yasudha mukta evasaha. Translation: shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. All right, back to text 17. Translation, text 17 translation. When one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. The Supreme Transcendental Truth is Lord Krishna. The whole Bhagavad Gita centers around the declaration of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the version of all Vedic literature. Paratattva means the Supreme Reality, who is understood by the knowers of the Supreme as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the last word in the Absolute. There is nothing more than that. The Lord says, Matta Purataram Nanyat Kinchirasti Dhananjaya. Impersonal Brahman is always supported by Krishna. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. Therefore, in all ways, Krishna is the Supreme Reality. One whose mind, intelligence, faith, and refuge are always in Krishna. Or, in other words, one who is fully in Krishna consciousness is undoubtedly washed clean of all misgivings and is in perfect knowledge. In everything concerning transcendence, a Krishna conscious person can thoroughly understand that there is duality. simultaneous identity and individuality in Krishna, and equipped with such transcendental knowledge, one can make steady progress on the path of liberation. Does Maharaj have any comments? Okay. It's a nice verse. Vadanti tat tattva vedam tattvam yaj jnanam advayam. Rameti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdete. It's in the Bhagavatam. The knowers of the absolute, they know this, the absolute, the supreme truth in three, is Brahman, Brahmeti, Brahman, Paramatmeti, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So these are these three understandings of the absolute truth correspond to the three categories of transcendentalists. You have the impersonalists, generally known as Gyanis. The Gyanis, they know Brahman through their studies and their meditation, their contemplation, their renunciation. They come to know their speculation, philosophical speculation. They come to know Brahman, this reality. Paramatma, the yogis, mystic yogis, meditate on this form of the Lord within the heart. By Krishna gives the process. Practice of yoga means to control the mind. That when the mind is controlled, they can focus on the Lord within the heart. It's Paramatma. And then Bhagavan, which corresponds to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this final category of transcendentalists is the bhakta, or the devotee, who engages in full Krishna consciousness and serves the Lord and comes to know him like that, in full. In full. It's nice. Here we say this is a very nice way to defeat anyone who thinks that that Brahman is or that Krishna is a manifestation of Brahman, or Brahman is transcendentally higher than Bhagavan. That Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. He says that he is the source of Brahman. So when we understand Krishna through Krishna consciousness, we can understand everything else that is subsidiary to that, like knowledge of the self automatically is there. You know, when we understand who is God, knowledge of the self is automatically there. So is Brahman, so is Paramatma, because all of those things are part of Krishna. All of those things are under Krishna, they belong to Krishna. You know, then by understanding Krishna, we can understand all of these things very nicely. But if one just comes to the platform of knowledge of the self, the eternal Atma, or Brahman, or Paramatma, he may not, it's not necessary that he knows Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in full. Only that knowledge is only reserved for the devotees who are in those relationships with Krishna. You know, like it's many examples. We have, you know, somebody has his energy. So just because I know his energy, like Tesla, there's many Tesla cars driving around now. Tesla's the energy. This car was, you know, on a material, in one sense, you can say that it's the guy's personal energy. You know, the guy who owns this company. It's his impersonal energy. It belongs to him. And so, but just because you know Tesla, the car, Doesn't necessarily mean you'll know anything about Tesla himself, or I mean, whatever his name is. Not Tesla, but somebody else. Just like what he likes to do in his personal time. How will you find that out? Well, you might know his car. You might say, "Oh, this kind of engine, this kind of thing," and you study it very nicely. You recognize it's coming from a person with some intelligence. But who exactly that person is, you can't find out like that. So we might know Brahman, or we might study the material world, you know, but just like that, you will never know the more esoteric uh, details about the person behind all of this. Prabhupada quotes another nice verse here. Mata parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. Mai sarvam idam protam mane sutre mani ganaiva. Krishna says, there's no truth superior than me, or Arjuna. Everything rests upon me like pearls are strung upon a thread. You know, so like a pearl necklace, Krishnendu Prabhu speaks this analogy, or this, he makes this point that when the pearls are strung upon the thread is hidden, you know. And so Krishna is that thread. He says, pearl, everything rests upon me like pearls are strung upon a thread. So we can analyze everything and still not know who is behind it all. You know, still not know who's behind it all. Father Krishna is giving us the process how to actually know, how to investigate deeper, how to know who he is. You know, who the person who's in control of everything is. That's perfect knowledge. That's the most confidential knowledge that there is. And it begins with knowledge of the self, as Krishna begins in the Bhagavad Gita, speaking of the eternal soul. It begins there. That's where the Vedic knowledge begins, with knowledge of the eternal self. And then it builds from there. There's Brahman. Then there's the localized aspect of God, Paramatma, seated in the heart, four-armed form of Vishnu. He's about, within the heart of the living entity, he's about 8 inches tall, so I think, something like that. So he's there, seated within the heart, and he's in his spiritual form. So we can't see it without the proper eyes, you know. The yogi, through purified senses, is actually able to see this form with his transcendental senses. So he practices the yoga, purifies the material senses, and then he's able to see the form with his transcendental senses when they become revitalized, you know. But nice thing is that the Shastra gives us the descriptions of the Lord. So it's not a speculative process. Somebody might sit down and meditate and he says, oh, I saw the Lord, he looks like this. But if it doesn't align with the Shastra, then it was his imagination, you know. And even then, nowadays, there's no hope of somebody practicing that and becoming purified enough, freed from material contamination, to where he can come to that realization of what that transcendent Lord looks like within his heart. You know, just simply will speculate and imagine something. But the Shastra gives the description. And the yogi will control his senses and meditate on that form and enter into that relationship with that Lord, which begins with awe and reverence, you know, and then one can develop his love all the way up to the highest manifestations of love of Godhead, you know, conjugal love, most intimate features of love of Godhead, you know, where one knows Krishna in his most intimate features, his most personal features. We're hearing today in the Bhagavatam class by Srila Prabhupada that the mood of the gopis, the pure devotees, is that they don't want anything, and similarly, they also feel like they don't have anything to give, but they're simply they're positioning themselves humbly before the Lord, you know, begging him to take whatever he wants from them, you know, whatever he may find, you know, or just simply begging to be used in his service. I don't have anything to give him, you know? Although I am asking for a lot, you know, in the preliminary stages of love of God. And he says that there's four types of individuals who come to him. The first one is the distressed, one who's in distress. In the material world, we're all in distress. We all fit into this category, and everyone who turns to God is mainly turning to Him through prayers, asking Him for certain things. But the pure devotee is not even asking Him for anything except to be used in His pure devotion, to be engaged in His pure devotional service, to be used for His pleasure, as He likes. Like the famous Bible, "Thy will, not my will. Thy will be done." So the devotee wants to be the instrument of the Lord, to serve Him without any personal gain, not considering anything for himself, just considering what is the Lord's pleasure. So that's the meaning behind our the mood that we're trying to cultivate when we're engaging in service, when we're chanting Hare Krishna. That's the meaning. That's the mood that we're trying to cultivate. And if we meditate on that meaning, it's very helpful. Prabhupada has given us that meaning very nicely. My Lord, oh Krishna, my Lord, oh divine energy of Krishna, Radha, Hare, please engage me in your service. So if we can meditate on that meaning while we're performing our service, performing our chanting, we can enter into that mood and it can become a reality for us. But we should meditate, contemplate on the meaning. That'll be very helpful for us. Then we'll cultivate the real attitude and we'll be satisfied. It's like we were hearing in class the other day, I think Magadari Prabhu was speaking about this, that Krishna told the gopis that you should just be satisfied with your good qualities. You're all good qualities. Similarly, when we're positioned in such a purified state where we're actually entering into that mood of, oh my Lord, please engage me in your service, the heart will be cleansed of all kinds of material contaminations. Therefore, we'll actually be satisfied. We'll be peaceful. All other desires for these horrible things will be removed from the heart. And simply that one desire for pure devotional service will just be there, and to please Krishna. And in that state, we can be satisfied in that purified state. We'll be free from all material suffering, and we'll enjoy the inherent nectar and bliss that's in that. Such love, such real love is there, So we will enjoy that love with Krishna, that pure love. All right, let's continue. Text 18. Translation: the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. Purport: a Krishna-conscious person does not make any distinction between species or castes. The brahmana and the outcast may be different from the social point of view, or a dog, a cow, or an elephant may be different from the point of view of species. But these differences of body are meaningless from the viewpoint of a learned transcendentalist. This is due to their relationship to the Supreme. For the Supreme Lord, by His plenary portion as Paramatma, is present in everyone's heart. Such an understanding of the Supreme is real knowledge. As far as the bodies are concerned, in different castes or different species of life, the Lord is equally kind to everyone because He treats every living being as a friend, yet maintains Himself as Paramatma regardless of the circumstances of the living entities. The Lord as Paramatma is present both in the outcast and in the Brahmana, although the body of a Brahmana and that of an outcast are not the same. The bodies are material productions of different modes of material nature, but the soul and the supersoul within the body are of the same spiritual quality. The similarity in the quality of the soul and the supersoul, however, does not make them equal in quantity. For the individual soul is present only in that particular body, whereas the Paramatma is present in each and every body. A Krishna-conscious person has full knowledge of this, and therefore he is truly learned and has equal vision. The similar characteristics of the soul and supersoul are that they are both conscious, eternal, and blissful. But the difference is that the individual soul is conscious within the limited jurisdiction of the body, whereas the supersoul is conscious of all bodies. The supersoul is present in all bodies without distinction. So the devotee of the Lord, he has gone beyond his consciousness is liberated. He's free from the bodily, the material contamination, the bodily concept of life. And so his consciousness is no longer limited. It's not no longer just solely designated to that, but he's able to be conscious of Krishna. And in that state, then one can be conscious of everything that belongs to Krishna as well. So all living entities are part and parcel of Krishna. And because the devotee has taken his consciousness up to the point of developing his dormant love of God for Krishna, then he automatically is able to connect with all living entities on that deepest level too. And this vision is not just limited to the bodily platform. Because in this conditioned state, when our consciousness is limited to this body, there's so many difficulties. Relationships become very, very difficult. There's so much attachment involved. There's so much aversion. So many different. I'm always trying to avoid something which is going to cause pain to my mind and body, false ego. And I'm always trying to accept something which will bring pleasure to my mind and my false ego, my body. But it's a very limited view, And in this conception, one is serving his body, serving his relatives, his friends, and if he's considered advanced in into society, he takes community and then society, country, things like that. But more or less, all these things are a waste of time. They're not, when we have access in this human form of life to developing our Krishna consciousness, then why not take advantage of that? That's the most beneficial thing we can do. And by doing so, we'll come off this limited platform of existence, and the sufferings that are inherent within that limited platform will no longer be there. And one can relish the bliss of, being situated in his transcendent self and being situated in relationship with Krishna. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, he embodied this mood of real compassion for all living entities, and he completely rejected these material activities which produce or are the cause of this mentality within the conditioned soul to discriminate between certain types of bodies. Okay, someone with that kind of body, or someone with that kind of background, or someone with this position in society is my friend, that person is my enemy, making distinctions like that, and getting into so much trouble and causing so much trouble for other living entities. So the devotee rejects this kind of mentality, So in order to enjoy these things which are horrible anyways, we have to cultivate a horrible mentality just to enjoy them. So it's a lot of work, actually, the material world, for a whole lot of nothing, So we can safely surrender our intelligence to Krishna and not give our intelligence, which when we acquire this human form of life, this intelligence we have is invaluable. No other species of life outside of the human form of life, we can take advantage of this. So we've got it now. It's invaluable intelligence that we can surrender to Krishna, and we'll attain our eternal position. Or we can surrender it to Maya and surrender it to the material energy and go on taking different bodies in this bodily misconception of life. We can choose, but I mean, it's not. If we just fix our intelligence up in Krishna consciousness, the decision becomes very easy. And with that fixed up intelligence, then we can cut very easily through this illusion, and make the right decision. Just use our intelligence to become attached to the spiritual master, and then liberation is not only liberation but Krishna prema is assured. So we'll get freedom and detachment from this material world. We'll get causeless knowledge, and ultimately we get love of God. So there's no better bargain. All you got to do is just surrender the intelligence, and then we surrender the senses, surrender the mind. Begins with hearing. So if we just hear, then we can surrender our intelligence, and then when the intelligence is surrendered, we are able to use our senses in Krishna's service. The mind becomes peaceful, the mind becomes under control, able to control the mind now, able to diminish this suffering condition of life, which arises from these senses, which are like wild animals pulling us in different directions, causing so much pain and suffering. And, so just simple thing, just begins with hearing. Shravanam begins with hearing, And that means it's can be a tricky thing. Like we'll come here and we'll sit down and our mind is so speculating, we can't even hear what the spiritual master is saying, because he'll say one thing and then we hear it and then we'll go on speculating. It'll cause this, and then we're not attentive. So we sit down and we try to um, bring our attention to him, and his words. We can do that. So the whole Krishna consciousness is a package. We give people the package. We give them the means by which they can control their senses, and it's a whole package. We can take any bit of it, but also then we have the whole thing that we can do: chanting, hearing, chanting, taking Krishna prasad. All of it happens tangentially in order for it to work nicely. So if somebody comes in and they can't even hear from the spiritual master, well, then they can be engaged in service, right? And then from that service, they can cultivate some taste, and then next learn how to control the senses, control the mind, and then they can hear. And then even more, intelligence is fortified, and then they can surrender nicely. So it's a whole package, We just plug people into the program. The program's happening in the temple, and we've got all the departments up and running that we need to help people be successful, So they're just saying it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a temple to make a devotee. It takes a whole temple to make a devotee, So Srila Prabhupada was really pleased with our cooperation in this endeavor, It's that we work together, and then we can take care of the guests that we get, and they cultivate affection and for the devotees and for the temple, and it's such a nice thing for them because they get pulled out of this material ocean that they're suffering in. They're suffering this thing. So we should be very much convinced that what we're doing is the best thing. It's like we're the spiritual EMTs, We're pulling the conditioned souls out of this disease condition. Srila Prabhupada has given us such a nice program, and we should have faith that this is it. Everything is here. and it's the perfect program to also plug other people into. I might want to go and do my own program. Oh, I'll just chant all day. That'll be my program. But how am I ever going to plug anyone into that? You know? Whereas here at the temple, people get plugged in and they can actually, they get a chance, and I'm satisfied too with my service, right? Because we've made it. We've already made it. Like when we come to the temple, we should realize, okay, we're already at the lotus feet of the spiritual master. We're already at the lotus feet of the Lord. We don't have to get all mental and speculate now, okay, now I gotta, okay, now I'm here, but now I gotta chant, 100 rounds every day. No, we don't have to do such crazy things. Just we come to the temple and we should engage in some nice humble service and serve the spiritual master and realize that our fortunate position and be satisfied with what we've been given, you know, and go on diligently performing humble services and trying to engage others in those services, you know. So it's such a nice program that we've been given. It's really perfect. Are you going to the next one? Translation, text 19 translation. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Purport. Equanimity of mind, as mentioned above, is the sign of self-realization. Those who have actually attained to such a stage should be considered to have conquered material conditions, specifically birth and death. As long as one identifies with this body, he is considered a conditioned soul. But as soon as he is elevated to the stage of equanimity through realization of the self, he is liberated from conditional life. In other words, he is no longer subject to take birth in the material world, but can enter into the spiritual sky after his death. The Lord is flawless because he is without attraction or hatred. Similarly, when a living entity is without attraction or hatred, he also becomes flawless and eligible to enter into the spiritual sky. Such persons are to be considered already liberated, and their symptoms are described below. It's also nice that ordinarily, like, people want to work up to this stage of self-realization, which requires a lot of work. If they're doing it, they're trying to do it from where they're at without accepting any help, and takes so much work. It's impossible. It's impossible. You know, it's impossible. But we have to accept the help from the devotees. So we all living entities have some faith. They have some faith. You know, everything is actually based on some faith. Like a living entity, when he wakes up in the morning, he has faith that, okay, the same thing that I did yesterday, I'll do again and it'll be successful. I either wake up at 6 in the morning to go to work, then he has faith that, okay, I'll wake up tomorrow and the same thing will be there. I'll wake up and get in my car and then go. He's got faith, faith that the world will be just like it was, all these different things. He turns on his podcast and he's got faith in the person he's listening to. He's got some faith. So with this faith, we can actually also enter into the association of devotees, and from there, we have access to the topmost thing, Krishna consciousness, right? So then when we engage in Krishna service, we cultivate Krishna consciousness, then automatically the mind becomes controlled. And then when the mind becomes controlled, the self becomes illumined, and then one becomes self-realized. So our process is just to give people Krishna, and then automatically everything is there. All processes are there. The mind and senses are controlled, intelligence, everything is controlled. And as a result, all knowledge is there. So self-realization is there. There's a comment or question.
Sometimes I hear the argument between like Christians and atheists. Christians, well, I hear atheists be like, it takes, or no, Christians will say that atheists, it takes as much faith to not believe and then as to believe. And then the atheists are like, no, the whole point is that you don't have faith. And then they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Well, the position of the atheist is particularly ridiculous because he has faith in God's energy, because everything is God's energy. So he's got faith in God's energy. He has faith in a particular scientist that he listened to. He has faith in the educational system. He has faith in all these different things. And also you have faith in God's energy, but you won't have faith in God. It just doesn't make any sense. You know. So his position is particularly ridiculous. But it's due to insufficient knowledge. You know. As a devotee, he has faith in God. You know. Have faith in God's devotee. But particularly, we're not even really concerned with this kind of faith, which is like changing all the time, you know. And it's not really a question of belief either, because God is there. There's a creation, there must be a creator, right? So you have pearls strung on a thread, there must be a thread. If I don't see it, it's ridiculous to say, "Oh, I don't believe it." But you're a madman. So eh, if I'm with somebody and I'm seeing them, I just say, I don't believe that you exist. It's just weird. There's a thing for this called solipsism, where one takes this ridiculous position where he just doesn't believe in things for the sake of not believing. That's not a question of belief. That thing is that it's God exists whether I believe in him or not. You know. Otherwise, what is this reality? This reality, we exist. If I exist, even the position of this solipsist person is that I exist. Therefore, I have faith that I exist. I just don't have faith that anything outside of myself exists. But if you have faith that you exist, well, where did you come from? Right? So why not? Why can't you have faith that God exists? Yeah. Or that the condition of the other living entities around you is the same as yours. So therefore they exist as well. But so these things just don't make sense. The position of the atheist is ridiculous. Yeah, anyways, you've got another one? Yeah, they have a certain kind of faith. Yeah. They have a certain kind of faith they have a faith in their system. You know, they have a faith in their process, which is also a miraculous process. So they're also accepting miracle, that life came from nothing, or that you can, you know, put something in a box and explode it until it creates something complex, you know, which doesn't make sense. It's not how things happen. That's not how anything we've ever seen has happened. Everything comes from someone. You know, I came from somebody, they came from this body, came from another body. That tree came from another tree, you know. The chair was built by somebody, you know. Um, no, nothing is random. Nothing just happens by chance, really. There's always a cause. And that cause is due to the living entity. And then the supreme cause is the supreme living entity. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bakunam yovididati kamam. That from the supreme eternal come the little eternals. From the supreme consciousness come the little consciousness. The many consciousness. And then he provides everything. He's their maintainer and the proprietor. So Krishna is the cause of all causes. So the atheists are also having faith in in their miracle that reality came from nothing or something, whatever. That's miraculous. Anyways, does anyone have any comments or questions? Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
What is it?
I have a question about someone who's on the Brahman platform. We can understand that they're liable to fall back down into material modes of nature. So they're on the transcendental platform though. I guess my question is surrounding association, whether or not, from my understanding, it's like someone who's obtained Bhagavan conception, understanding of the absolute, knowing that it's the last word. They kind of they cross a threshold in which nothing can really bring them back down into the material world. At least, so I think. So I'm pretty sure this is not the same for someone on Brahman platform.
Yeah, it's not quite the same. Like, material world is a place of material variety. You know, there's material variegatedness. There's variety, but it's material. Krishna's external energy. And then there's also material non-distinction. There's in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there's this place called Mahakalapur, you know, and it's just on the outskirts of the material universe. It's a place of, it's a abode of darkness. So it's like nirvana. And the Buddhists talk about nirvana as this like nothing, this darkness. It's like, it's material oneness. It's a state of, because they haven't attained a transcendental consciousness, but still they've used their intelligence. Buddha means the enlightened, the intelligent one, to cut through the illusion of the material world. So what are they left with? Well, this void it's a void. That's there. That's material though. And then beyond that is spiritual oneness. You know, so somebody is, when somebody comes to that platform because he has accepted the he's got faith in Shastra, then he's able to actually access the transcendental realm, Brahman. Still, because we know that there's spiritual variety, which is actually which is what will satisfy the soul. He doesn't have access to that yet. His knowledge doesn't go that far, so he's still allured by the material world. He looks back and he sees the world of variety in the material world, and he's allured by it. And he's in the mode of goodness, so he will generally take the mode of goodness things, you know, starts that way, but then from there you just get swept away. So yeah, these yogis, yeah, we can see this with these yogis. They take to these activities. But the devotee who makes it to that abode of spiritual variety in relationship with Krishna, there's nothing which can allure him from that. No, there's nothing. There's no pleasure which will allure, because the material world he's made it. You know, he's made it. So he's relishing supreme pleasure in that. Is that okay? Or all right.
I had a question. Why does the atheist have faith in God's energy?
Well, because he has to in order to survive. You know, plus he's been conditioned that way. He was raised in a society which has instilled that kind of faith within him. You know, I mean, that's basically it. In his own ignorance, you know, he's led by sense gratification, and so he's developed a type of faith in these things, following his mind, and yeah, his relatives have conditioned him to these things, should, America is the best country, his faith in his country, like that. So also faith is inherent to the living entity. So if he's not having faith in Krishna, then he has to have it in material energy. He can't not have it. He can't not exist, you know?
Where did you get that faith is inherent in the living entity?
Well, because faith is required in order. So, Jivara Srupa Hare Krishna Nitya Das. The living entity is an eternal servant of Krishna, right? And faith is the preliminary factor in that, you know? So you can't do anything without that giving a little faith to the process, so you enter into this process with a little bit of faith, so how can you be in the spiritual world without faith? You won't be. But if we're eternal servants of Krishna, then that means we eternally have this faith, and it's just being put somewhere, at any given moment. It's here or it's there or it's there.
What I was meaning to say is like, the atheist doesn't have faith in God, so he would say, "I have no faith." But you're saying that faith is inherent to the living entity. So, where would you find this in the scripture?
I'm not sure. I guess you could say it's a philosophical speculation. It's something that I've seen. It's like you can see that. I mean, is this related to this point? Sure. This is a good question.
I don't know. I have an example came to mind, which would be like people have faith in what are those things called? A gambling machine. They get some money. I don't know. They're very eager. They keep playing it.
I mean, it's not blind faith, it's, the devotee doesn't even have blind faith either, but once we've been sold on something, we put our faith in it, It's like whether you're an atheist or a devotee, you are sold in something and you put your faith there, So I don't know, maybe somebody else has some more. What's that?
The beginning question was, why does the atheist have faith in God's energy?
No, I meant to say he has faith in Maya. He's got faith in the external energy. He's got faith in his car. He's got faith in his job. He's got faith in his mind and all these different things. It's a little hard to hear, Prabhu. Can you get him a mic?
Hare Krishna. So the atheist doesn't believe in God. So there's something always bigger than him. So Prabhupada makes the point that the people that don't believe in God, and death is ultimately God, because it's the thing that's higher than them that they can't control. That's their absolute. That's their supreme thing. So when the discussion is about the atheist not believing in God but worshiping God's energy, they're doing that, but they don't believe in God. They don't know of God, but the material energy is obviously greater than them. So they're worshiping the material energy. So you can either worship God directly or you can worship him through, these different faculties of his different energies. We can surrender directly to God and work accordingly under his direction and the direction of his pure devotees, or we can not surrender and then we're still working under the direction of God. What's that verse? Ishvara, it's like 1861 or something. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishtati Ramayan Ramabuyata Yantra Rudhani Mayaya Ramabuyaya Kalpate. Meaning the Supreme Lord situated within the heart of all the living entities and directing their wanderings. So whether the living entity is serving God directly or serving him indirectly, the Lord is still controlling him. But the atheist doesn't believe that, he doesn't see that. And ultimately our faith goes where we think our happiness will come. We'll put faith in what we think will actually bring us the greatest gain, the greatest good. So if we're not convinced that there's something better than material pleasures, then obviously you're going to chase this. But then there's Anamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, up to Jnana, Vijnana, and Ananda. So devotees, we're trying to aspire for the highest thing, where, the spiritual bliss coming from a reciprocation from Krishna. But most materialists are not even on like the intellectual platform of thinking. They're just on like gross sense gratification. But there are some famous atheists who are above the base nature of material existence, and they're more on the jnana platform, of deriving pleasure from their intelligence and thinking. But that intelligence and thinking alone will never bring somebody to a complete understanding of what is God. Through jnana and speculation, you can come to a platform of realizing that there's Brahman, this, God in the form of impersonal nature, you could say, but you'll never go beyond that. So we have to hear from the scriptures. I don't know if this helps at all, but that's a few thoughts.
Yeah, it kind of does, but it actually does. If I was wondering though, like, who said that we put our faith in what makes us happy? I had a feeling. Okay.
I could break it down. It's not like you need scriptural evidence for something so simple. It's easy that anything you do, you play this sport, you do this activity, you're doing it because you think it's going to make you feel good, that it's going to be fun, it's going to be exciting. You don't need, I'm sure if we wanted to, we could find something to elaborate deeper, but it's a very simple thing to meditate on, that we put faith in the activities that we think are going to benefit us. So everybody's acting with limited knowledge, and then their faith is going in so many different directions because everybody's selfishly motivated.
I'm satisfied.